The crystal towers of Keth Prime shook as another wave of explosions lit up the purple sky. Ambassador Veltar pressed his thin fingers against the observation window, watching his world burn. Below him, the elegant spires that had taken centuries to grow were cracking and falling like broken glass. "How many colonies have we lost?" he asked without turning around. High Speaker Zaranel consulted her datapad with trembling hands. 17 systems in the past month. The Vraktul swarm moves faster than we predicted. They consume everything and leave nothing behind. Veltar closed his large, dark eyes. The Kethalari had been a peaceful people for over 1,000 years. Their technology was advanced but delicate, designed for their low-gravity worlds and gentle atmospheres. Their ships were beautiful works of art that could travel between stars, but they were never meant for war. The Vraktul were different. They were like a plague of insects that swept across the galaxy, eating entire worlds and turning them into hive ships. Their technology was crude but effective. They built their weapons from the bones of dead planets and powered them with the screams of conquered species. "What about our allies?" Veltar asked, though he already knew the answer. The Silani Collective withdrew their fleets yesterday. The Cooperative of Free Worlds voted to close their borders. Everyone is running. Zaranel's voice was barely a whisper. "We are alone." Another explosion, closer this time. The building swayed and dust fell from the ceiling. Through the window, Veltar could see the dark shapes of Vraktul fighters swarming through the clouds like angry insects. They moved in perfect formation, guided by the hive mind that connected every member of their species. "There is one option we have not discussed," said Elder Corrin from the corner of the room. The old Kethalari had been silent during the entire meeting, but now he stepped forward. His walking stick clicked against the smooth floor with each step. "What option?" Veltar turned to face him. "We have tried everything. Our weapons barely scratch their ships. Our shields fail after minutes of combat. We cannot fight them." "Elder." Corrin reached into his robes and pulled out a small data crystal. 2 cycles ago, I received this from a trader in the Outer Rim. It contains stories, legends really, about a species they call the Deathworlders. Zaranel made a sound of disgust. "Fairy tales, stories to frighten children." "Perhaps," Corrin said calmly. "But what if they are real?" The trader claimed these Deathworlders come from impossible planets where the gravity would crush us, and the weather could destroy our cities. He said they were savage, violent creatures who somehow built ships and reached the stars. Veltar felt a chill run down his spine. Even if such beings exist, why would they help us? If they are as violent as the stories claim, they might be worse than the Vraktul. "Because," Corrin said, inserting the crystal into the room's computer system, "according to these legends, they hate bullies more than anything else." The holographic display came to life, showing star charts and data files. Most of it was corrupted, or incomplete, but there were fragments of information. References to a species that had spread across dozens of star systems, despite coming from a world that should have killed them. Reports of ships that looked like flying weapons. Stories of warriors who fought with a fury that terrified even the most hardened mercenaries. "This is madness," Zaranel said. "We cannot base our survival on myths and legends." The building shook again, more violently this time. Through the window, Veltar could see Vraktul ground forces landing in the city center. Their massive forms moved through the streets, crushing everything in their path. Soon they would reach the government district. Soon it would be over. "How long before they reach us?" he asked. "Hours, maybe less," Zaranel replied, checking her scanner. "The defense grid is failing. Our ground forces are retreating." Veltar looked at the data crystal again. In all the legends of his people, there were no stories of heroes arriving to save them at the last moment. The Kethalari believed in logic, science, and peaceful solutions. They did not believe in miracles. But what choice did they have? "Can we send a signal based on this information?" he asked. Elder Corrin nodded. The trader provided coordinates for several systems where these Deathworlders might be found. The signal would need to be broadcast across a wide area of space. "Do it," Veltar said. "Ambassador, this is foolish," Zaranel protested. "If such creatures exist, They might come here and destroy what little remains of our civilization. The stories say they are monsters. Look outside, Veltar said, pointing at the burning city. Monsters are already here. What could be worse than extinction? Zaranel had no answer for that. Elder Corrin worked quickly at the communication console. His fingers danced over the controls as he programmed the signal. I am including everything we know about the Vraktul, their tactics, their technology, their numbers. If anyone receives this message, they will understand what we face. What should we say? Veltar asked. Corrin paused. The truth. That we are a peaceful people facing destruction. That we have no weapons capable of stopping our enemies. That we will be grateful for any help, even from, he hesitated, even from Deathworlders. The signal was composed and encrypted. It contained star charts showing Kethlari space and the advancing Vraktul swarm. It included technical data about both species and a desperate plea for assistance. Most importantly, it contained the location of Keith Prime and the promise that anyone who helped would be rewarded beyond measure. Transmitting now, Corrin said, his hand hovering over the final control. Outside, the sound of weapons fire was getting closer. Vraktul warriors were in the streets now, their chittering voices echoing off the crystal walls. The elegant towers that had been the pride of Kethlari civilization were falling one by one. Wait, Zaranel said suddenly. If we do this, we change everything. Our people have lived in peace for 1,000 years. We have never asked for help from violent species. We have never faced extinction before, Veltar interrupted. Send the signal. Elder Corrin pressed the control. The message shot out into space at faster than light speed, spreading across the galaxy like ripples on a pond. Somewhere out there, it might reach someone willing to help. Or it might reach no one at all. How long before we know if anyone received it? Veltar asked. If they exist, if they care, if they can help. Corrin shrugged. Days, maybe weeks, assuming we live that long. The three Kethlari stood in silence, watching their world die outside the window. They had sent their message into the darkness of space, hoping against hope that someone would answer. They had no way of knowing that their signal had already been received by a species that measured response time in hours, not days. They had no way of knowing that their desperate plea had reached creatures who had been waiting their entire history for someone to give them a good reason to go to war. The Deathworlders were coming, and they were bringing everything they had. Admiral Sarah Chen was drinking her morning coffee when the universe changed forever. She sat in her command chair aboard the TFS Indomitable, watching the stars through the main viewport. Her third fleet was on routine patrol near the edge of human space far from Earth and the core worlds. It was supposed to be a quiet assignment. Admiral, called Lieutenant Torres from the communication station, we're receiving a priority signal. It's strange, ma'am. Chen set down her coffee cup. In 25 years of military service, she had learned that strange signals usually meant trouble. Strange how? It's not from any human colony or ship. The encryption is alien, but our computers managed to decode it. The message claims to be from something called the Kethlari Confederation. Chen felt her pulse quicken. First contact protocols had been drilled into every officer in the fleet, but they were mostly theoretical. Humans had been exploring space for over 200 years and had found planets with ancient ruins and long-dead civilizations, but never living aliens. Put it on the main screen, she ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a three-dimensional star map. Red markers indicated the location of something called Kethlari space, nearly 800 light-years from Earth. Other markers, colored black, showed the advance of something identified as the Vraktul swarm. Then the message began. The voice was translated by the ship's computer, but Chen could hear the fear beneath the artificial calm. The speaker identified himself as Ambassador Veltar of the Kethlari Confederation. He explained that his people were facing extinction at the hands of an enemy they could not defeat. As the message continued, Chen found herself leaning forward in her chair. The Kethlari described their attackers in terms that made her think of historical human conflicts. Overwhelming numbers, brutal tactics, the systematic destruction of entire worlds. It was warfare on a scale that would have impressed the worst dictators in human history. But what caught her attention were the details the Kethalari provided about themselves. They were a peaceful species that had not fought a war in over 1,000 years. Their ships were designed for exploration and trade, not combat. They had no standing military and no weapons capable of stopping the swarm. "My God," whispered Commander Rodriguez, her second-in-command. "They're defenseless." The message ended with a desperate plea. The Kethalari had heard stories about a species called Deathworlders and were broadcasting this signal in the hope that someone, anyone, would come to their aid. Chen stared at the display in silence. Around her, the bridge crew waited for orders. Finally, she spoke. "Torres, how long ago was this message sent?" "Based on the transmission data, approximately 18 hours ago, Admiral." "And how long would it take us to reach their space?" "At maximum speed, about 36 hours. Chen stood up and began pacing. The message had included detailed information about the Vraktul swarm. From what she could see, they were a hive-minded species that consumed entire star systems. Their technology was crude but effective, their numbers overwhelming. To the Kethalari, they must seem unstoppable. To Chen, they looked like every enemy humanity had ever faced, just bigger and uglier. "Rodriguez, what's your assessment?" she asked. Her second-in-command studied the tactical display. "The Vraktul use classic swarm tactics, overwhelming numerical superiority, coordinated attacks, rapid expansion. It's effective against opponents who can't adapt quickly." "But," Rodriguez smiled grimly, "but they've never faced humans before. Their tactics assume their enemies will be predictable and fight, according to established patterns. We don't do that." Chen nodded. Human military doctrine had been forged in the fires of countless wars. They had learned to be adaptable, creative, and ruthless when necessary. What the Kethalari saw as impossible odds, humans saw as Tuesday. "Torres, open a priority channel to Fleet Command. I need to speak with Admiral Morrison immediately." "Aye, ma'am." The wait seemed to last forever, but it was actually only a few minutes before Admiral Morrison's face appeared on the screen. He was sitting in his office on Earth, and Chen could see the lights of Geneva through the window behind him. "Sarah, I got your preliminary report. Please tell me you're not asking for permission to start humanity's first interstellar war." "Not start one, sir, end one." Chen quickly explained the situation. She transmitted the Kethalari message and her tactical assessment. As Morrison reviewed the data, she could see his expression change from skepticism to concern to determination. "How many ships would you need?" he asked. "Sir, you heard me, Admiral. How many ships would you need to stop this swarm?" Chen felt her heart racing. She had expected to be ordered back to Earth for debriefing, not given carte blanche for a military operation. "My third fleet could probably handle their main force, but if we're going to do this, we need to do it right. These Kethalari are counting on us. We can't afford to fail." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Chen could see him thinking, weighing options and consequences. Finally, he spoke. "You'll have the entire war armada." Chen felt the blood drain from her face. The Terran War Armada was humanity's full military might. 500 ships, including the massive Titan-class dreadnoughts that could crack planets. It was the fleet they had built to protect Earth from any threat. "Sir, that's everything. I know. But if we're going to make first contact with an alien species, I want them to understand exactly who they're dealing with. I want the entire galaxy to understand that humans protect those who cannot protect themselves." The transmission ended, and Chen found herself staring at a blank screen. Around her, the bridge crew was silent. They all understood what had just happened. Humanity was going to war against an alien species they had never seen, to protect people they had never met. On the other side of the galaxy. "Torres, get me fleet communications. I need to speak with every captain in the Armada." Over the next hour, Chen watched as human ships began arriving through hyperspace jumps. Carriers, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and the massive dreadnoughts that could glass worlds. Each one was a product of humanity's violent history, designed to fight and win against impossible odds. The aliens thought they were calling for help from mythical Deathworlders. They had no idea they were about to meet the species that had turned warfare into an art form. "Admiral, Torres called out. All ships report ready for departure. Chen looked at the tactical display showing her fleet. 500 ships carrying the finest military force humanity had ever assembled. They were going to face an enemy that had conquered most of a galactic sector and had never known defeat. Set course for Kethlari space maximum speed. Aye, Admiral. As the Indomitable jumped to hyperspace, Chen allowed herself a small smile. The Kethlari had sent their message to Deathworlders, not knowing that Earth was exactly that kind of world. They were about to discover what happened when someone threatened the innocent in front of humans. The cavalry was coming, and it was bringing everything it had. Ambassador Veltar had never seen anything so terrifying in his life. He floated in the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel, watching the human fleet emerge from hyperspace at the edge of Kethlari territory. Each ship that appeared made his heart sink a little deeper into despair. The human vessels looked like weapons that had been designed by nightmares. They were angular, brutal things covered in armor plating and weapon systems. Where Kethlari ships were smooth and elegant, these were sharp and deadly. Where his people built for beauty, the humans had built for war. How many ships are there? Asked High Speaker Zaranel, her voice barely a whisper. Scanners are detecting over 500 vessels, replied the ship's captain, including several that are enormous. Veltar watched as one of the larger human ships slowly rotated to face their direction. It was easily 10 times the size of their largest vessel, and its hull was studded with weapons that could probably crack a moon. The mere sight of it made him feel sick. Perhaps we made a mistake, Zaranel said quietly. Perhaps we should have faced extinction rather than invite these monsters into our space. Before Veltar could respond, the communication system crackled to life. Kethlari vessel, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation. We received your distress signal. We're here to help. The voice was translated by their computer, but it sounded strong and confident. Not the voice of a monster, but of someone who was used to being obeyed. Open communications, Veltar ordered, though his voice shook as he said it. The main screen flickered and suddenly he was face to face with a human. Admiral Chen was smaller than he had expected. The legend spoke of giant warriors, but she was barely taller than a Kethlari. Her skin was a warm brown color and her dark hair was pulled back in a practical style. She wore a uniform that was clean and professional, though Veltar noticed the weapon at her side. Ambassador Veltar, I presume, she said, and Veltar was surprised to see her smile. It was not the savage grin he had expected from a Deathworlder, but something almost kind. Admiral Chen, he managed to say. We are grateful that you received our message, though I must admit, we did not expect so many ships. We don't do things halfway, Chen replied. Your message mentioned something called the Vruktul Swarm. We'd like to know everything you can tell us about them. For the next hour, Veltar and his advisors shared everything they knew about their enemies. They showed tactical recordings of Vruktul attacks, explained their weapons and ships, described their hive mind coordination. With each piece of information, he expected to see fear or concern on the human faces. Instead, Admiral Chen and her officers looked bored. Is that it? Asked a human officer when the briefing was finished. Standard swarm tactics, basic orbital bombardment, no individual initiative? This should be straightforward. Veltar felt his blood run cold. Straightforward? They have destroyed 17 of our colonies. Their ships number in the thousands. About that, Admiral Chen said, leaning forward in her chair. I've been reviewing your ship designs and defense systems. They're very impressive, but they seem to be built more for efficiency than combat. Have the Kethlari ever fought a war? Not for over 1,000 years, Veltar admitted. We are a peaceful people. We believe in negotiation and compromise. That's admirable, Chen said, and she seemed to mean it. But sometimes peaceful people need others to fight for them. That's what we're here for. Commander Rodriguez, Chen's second-in-command, spoke up. Admiral, we should probably explain about Earth. Chen nodded. Good point. Ambassador, your message referred to us as Deathworlders. I'm curious where you heard that term. From traders and merchants, Veltar replied. Stories about a violent species from an impossible world. We thought they were myths. They're not myths, Chen said. Earth is what we call a Class 12 death world. The gravity is nearly 3 times what you're used to. Our weather systems generate more energy than your entire fleet's reactors. We have predators that could hunt your people for sport. Veltar felt faint. And you evolved there? We didn't just evolve there, Rodriguez added with what might have been pride. We conquered it. Every other species on Earth either serves us, fears us, or went extinct when we decided they were in our way. But that's not the worst part, Chen continued. The worst part is that we've been fighting wars against each other for our entire recorded history. We've had conflicts that lasted decades, weapons that could destroy entire continents, and strategies that would make your worst nightmares seem pleasant. Zaranel made a small whimpering sound. Why are you telling us this? Chen's expression softened. Because I want you to understand that the Vraktul swarm, which seems unstoppable to you, is just another enemy to us. We've faced worse odds against more dangerous opponents on our own world before we even reached the stars. Veltar tried to process this information. The humans came from a world so hostile that it had forged them into living weapons. They had spent millennia fighting wars that made the current crisis look like a minor disagreement, and they had brought 500 warships to help people they had never met. Why? He asked. Why would you risk your lives for strangers? Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment, and Veltar could see her thinking. There's an old human saying, evil succeeds when good people do nothing. Your people are good. The Vraktul are evil. We're here to make sure evil doesn't succeed. But what do you want in return? Zaranel asked. What price do you demand for your help? No price, Chen said simply. When this is over, if you want to establish trade relations or share technology, that would be nice. But we're not here for profit. We're here because it's the right thing to do. Veltar stared at the human admiral in amazement. Everything he had heard about Deathworlders suggested they were savage monsters, interested only in violence and conquest. But Admiral Chen seemed genuinely concerned about the welfare of the Kethlari people. There is one thing, Chen added. We're going to need detailed star charts of this entire sector. The Vraktul won't expect us to use human tactics, but we need to know the terrain. Of course, Veltar said quickly. Anything you need. Good. We'll also need you to evacuate any civilians from the border worlds. When we engage the swarm, things are going to get messy. How messy? Zaranel asked. Commander Rodriguez smiled, and this time it was definitely savage. Let's just say that when humans go to war, we don't worry too much about property damage. As the meeting ended and the connection was closed, Veltar floated in silence with his advisors. Outside the viewport, the human fleet was already moving into formation. The massive ships turned with surprising grace, positioning themselves between Kethlari space and the approaching swarm. What have we done? Zaranel whispered. Veltar watched as fighter squadrons launched from the human carriers. Even at this distance, he could see that the small craft were heavily armed and moved with deadly purpose. We have invited apex predators to hunt in our territory, he said quietly. I just hope we haven't made a mistake we'll all regret. But deep in his hearts, beneath the fear and uncertainty, Veltar felt something he hadn't experienced in months. For the first time since the swarm had appeared, he felt hope. The Deathworlders were here and they were preparing for war. The Vraktul Hive Queen received the reports with growing confusion. Her scouts had detected the arrival of unknown vessels at the edge of the territory she was claiming. The ships were primitive in design, crude and angular like weapons rather than proper spacecraft. They posed no threat to her swarm, or so she had thought. The first battle took place at the mining colony of Zerion 4. The Hive Queen had sent 300 ships to harvest the planet's resources and eliminate any remaining defenders. It should have been a simple operation. Instead, it became a massacre. Admiral Chen watched the battle unfold from the bridge of the Indomitable. Her tactical display showed the Vraktul fleet approaching Zerion 4 in their standard swarm formation. Hundreds of insect-like ships moved in perfect coordination, guided by their hive mind. They're not even trying to hide, observed Commander Rodriguez. No scouts, No advanced screening. They just fly straight at their targets. Makes sense, Chen replied. When you've never lost a battle, why bother with complicated tactics? The human fleet had been waiting in the asteroid field surrounding Xerion War 4 for 2 days. Their ships were hidden among the rocks, their engines cold and their weapons powered down. The Vrak tool scanners detected nothing unusual. All ships, this is Admiral Chen, she broadcast on the fleet channel. Remember, we want prisoners from their command, ships. Intelligence needs to understand how their hive mind works, but everything else is fair game. The trap was sprung with devastating efficiency. As the Vraktul fleet entered the asteroid field, human ships emerged from hiding and opened fire. Missiles streaked through space, each one carrying enough explosive power to level a city. The alien ships, expecting no resistance, were caught completely off guard. The first wave of attacks destroyed nearly 100 Vraktul vessels in the opening seconds. Their crude armor, designed to intimidate rather than protect, crumpled under the impact of human weapons. But the real shock came when the survivors tried to regroup. Human fighters, launched from carriers hidden behind the larger asteroids, swarmed through the alien formation. The small craft moved with impossible agility, dodging return fire and striking at weak points with surgical precision. Each fighter was piloted by a human who had trained for years to fly in three-dimensional combat. The Vraktul had never faced individual pilots. Their own fighters were controlled by the hive mind, predictable and coordinated but unable to adapt to changing situations. Against human pilots who could think and react independently, they were helpless. "Sir," called Lieutenant Torres from the communications station, "we're receiving a transmission from the Vraktul command ship. They're trying to surrender." Admiral Chen felt a cold smile cross her face. "Tell them surrender is not an option. They chose to be predators. Now they get to learn what happens when predators meet apex predators." The battle continued for 3 hours. By the end, the entire Vraktul fleet had been destroyed except for 2 command ships that had been captured by human boarding parties. The asteroid field was littered with debris and the frozen bodies of alien warriors. But the real shock was yet to come. Major Sarah Martinez led the assault team that boarded the first Vraktul command ship. She and her Marines wore powered armor that made them look like walking tanks. Each suit was equipped with weapon systems that could punch through battleship hulls and life support that could keep them fighting in the vacuum of space. The Vraktul warriors they encountered were large, insect-like creatures with razor-sharp claws and natural armor. They were strong and fast and completely fearless. Under normal circumstances, they would have been terrifying opponents. But these were not normal circumstances. "Contact front," Martinez reported as her team advanced through the ship's corridors. "Multiple hostiles engaging now." The battle inside the ship was brutal and one-sided. The Vraktul fought with savage fury, but their claws and natural weapons were useless against human armor. The Marines advanced methodically, clearing each corridor and compartment with practiced efficiency. What horrified the Vraktul was not just that they were losing, but how the humans fought. Where the aliens relied on their hive mind for coordination, the humans operated as individuals who could adapt to any situation. Where the Vraktul used overwhelming numbers, the humans used tactics and superior technology. Worst of all, the humans seemed to enjoy it. "This is actually fun," commented Sergeant Williams as he kicked down a blast door. "It's been too long since we had a decent fight." Within an hour, both command ships had been secured. The surviving Vraktul were captured and held for questioning, though most were in shock from the experience of fighting enemies who were better at warfare than they were. The news of the defeat spread through the swarm like wildfire. For the first time in their species' history, an entire Vraktul fleet had been destroyed by an unknown enemy. The Hive Queen ordered an immediate investigation. She sent larger fleets to probe the human positions. Each one met the same fate. At the Battle of Kepler Station, 500 Vraktul ships faced off against 50 human vessels. The aliens expected their numerical advantage to carry the day, but Admiral Chen had other plans. "Deploy the Titans," she ordered. The massive dreadnoughts moved forward like floating fortresses. Each one was over 2 kilometers long and armed with weapons that could crack planets. They opened fire at maximum range. their heavy guns sending shells the size of buildings screaming through space. The Vroctal fleet simply disintegrated. Their ships, built for intimidation rather than actual combat, could not withstand the devastating firepower of human capital ships. The battle lasted less than an hour. But it was the psychological warfare that truly broke the swarm. The humans had studied the Vroctal hive mind and discovered its weakness. The aliens were used to fighting enemies who were predictable and followed established patterns. When faced with humans who could think creatively and adapt to any situation, their coordination began to break down. Admiral Chen ordered her ships to use random tactics, constantly changing their approach and methods. Sometimes they would attack head-on with overwhelming firepower. Sometimes they would use stealth and ambush tactics. Sometimes they would retreat and draw the enemy into traps. The Vroctal hive mind, designed for efficient coordination, could not cope with such unpredictable opponents. Their fleets began making mistakes, failing to coordinate properly, and even attacking each other in confusion. "Ma'am," Torres reported during one battle, "the enemy fleet is retreating. They're not even trying to complete their objectives." Chen nodded with satisfaction. Fear is spreading through their hive mind. They're starting to understand that they're not the apex predators in this galaxy. The war continued for 6 more weeks, but the outcome was never in doubt. Human fleets systematically destroyed Vroctal forces throughout the sector, pushing them back toward their home territory. The aliens, who had never known defeat, found themselves facing an enemy they could not understand or overcome. The final battle took place at the edge of Kethalari space, where the last major Vroctal fleet made a desperate stand. 2,000 alien ships faced the full might of the Terran War Armada in what should have been an epic confrontation. Instead, it was target practice. The human fleet destroyed the swarm's forces with clinical efficiency, capturing their command ships and scattering the survivors. As the last enemy vessels fled toward their home systems, Admiral Chen opened a communication channel that would be heard throughout Vroctal space. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation," she announced. "The Kethalari Confederation is under our protection. Any Vroctal ships found in this sector will be destroyed without warning. Consider this your only notice." The message was clear. The swarm could retreat, or it could face extinction at the hands of the Deathworlders. For the first time in their species' history, the Vroctal chose to run. The war was over before most of the galaxy even knew it had begun. Ambassador Veltar stood in the rebuilt council chambers of Keth Prime, watching the ceremony through the tall windows. Outside, Kethalari children played in parks that 3 months ago had been smoking ruins. The crystal towers had been regrown, the streets repaired, and life had returned to normal. Well, almost normal. The massive human ships still orbited the planet, their dark hulls a stark contrast against the purple sky. Admiral Chen had kept a small fleet in Kethalari space as a precaution, though everyone knew the Vroctal would not be returning. The swarm had withdrawn to their home territories and marked the entire sector as forbidden space. The humans accomplished, in weeks, what we thought was impossible, said High Speaker Zaranel, joining him at the window. "I still cannot believe it." Veltar nodded. The human military efficiency had been terrifying to witness. They had not just defeated the swarm, they had broken it completely. Vroctal fleets that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries now fled at the first sign of human ships. "They make it look easy," he said. "But I have been studying their history. Nothing about their success was easy." He had spent weeks reading the historical records that Admiral Chen had shared with the Kethalari government. The story of humanity was written in blood and struggle, a species that had survived everything their hostile world could throw at them, and then turned their attention to surviving each other. They had fought wars that lasted generations. They had built weapons that could destroy their own planet. They had created military strategies that were studied as works of art. Every conflict had taught them something new about warfare, and they had learned from each lesson. The Vroctal, for all their numbers and natural weapons, had never faced anything like that. "The Galactic Council has sent another message," Zaranel said, holding up a datapad. "They want to meet with the humans immediately." Veltar was not surprised. News of humanity's victory had spread across the galaxy faster than their ships could travel. Every species that had heard of the Vraktul swarm wanted to know more about the mysterious Deathworlders who had defeated them so easily. "What do they want?" he asked. "Protection," Zaranel replied simply. "Half the council members are already drafting alliance proposals. The other half want to hire human mercenaries." The door to the chamber opened, and Admiral Chen entered with a small escort. She had been on the planet for the formal surrender ceremony, accepting the gratitude of the Kethalari people for their liberation. Now she wore her dress uniform, clean and professional, though Veltar noticed she still carried a weapon. "Ambassador, High Speaker," she said with a polite nod, "I wanted to speak with you before my fleet departs." "You are leaving?" Veltar felt a sudden stab of panic. What if the Vraktul returned? What if there were other threats in the galaxy? "Most of my ships are returning to human space," Chen explained. "But I'm leaving the 7th Fleet here as a permanent garrison." "Commander, Rodriguez will be in charge of sector defense." She activated a holographic display that showed the local star systems. "We've established patrol routes and early warning networks. If anything threatens Kethalari space, we'll know about it immediately." "Thank you," Veltar said, though the words seemed inadequate. "Your people have given us back our lives. How can we ever repay such a debt?" Admiral Chen smiled, and Veltar was struck again by how kind her expression was. It was hard to reconcile this gentle human with the warrior who had crushed the swarm so efficiently. "There is no debt," she said, "but there is something I want to discuss with you. The Galactic Council has invited humanity to join as a member species." "That is wonderful news," Zaranel said. "You certainly deserve a place among the civilized races." "The thing is," Chen continued, "they want us to join as protectors. They want human fleets to guard their borders and human soldiers to fight their wars. They see us as weapons to be pointed at their enemies." Veltar felt uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "And you object to this?" "Not exactly," Chen said. "We're willing to protect peaceful species from aggressors, but we're not going to be anyone's attack dogs. If we join the council, it will be as equals, not as hired muscle." She paused, looking out the window at the children playing in the park below. "We've learned something important from this conflict. The galaxy is full of peaceful species like the Kethalari who have forgotten how to fight. That's not a bad thing, but it leaves them vulnerable to predators. So you will protect them," Veltar said. "We will protect them," Chen agreed. "But we will also teach them to protect themselves. Peace is wonderful, but peace without strength is just an invitation for bullies." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from Chen's communicator. She answered it quickly, listened for a moment, then smiled. "What is it?" Zaranel asked. "Another distress signal," Chen replied. "A species called the Malari Republic is under attack by something called the Krex Empire. They're requesting immediate assistance from the Terran Federation." Veltar watched as Chen's expression changed. The kind, gentle human diplomat disappeared, replaced by the cold, calculating warrior who had defeated the swarm. "Admiral," Veltar said quietly, "may I ask you something?" "Of course." "When you received our distress signal, you could have ignored it. You could have decided that our problems were not your concern. Why did you come?" Chen was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "There's something about my species that I don't think other races understand. Humans are not naturally violent. We don't fight because we enjoy it, though some of us do. We fight because we cannot stand injustice." She gestured toward the window, where Kethalari families were walking safely through the streets. "When we received your message, we saw people who were facing extinction through no fault of their own. We saw bullies attacking the innocent. Everything in our nature rebelled against that." She paused. "We came because it was the right thing to do." Veltar felt tears forming in his large eyes. "And now you will go help the Malari." "We will go help the Malari," Chen confirmed. "And after that, whoever else needs help. That's who we are now. The galaxy's guardians." She stood up, preparing to leave. "The council can debate whether to accept us as members or not, but we're going to keep doing what we think is right regardless of what they decide. As Admiral Chen left the chamber, Veltar turned back to the window. The human ships were already preparing to depart, their engines glowing as they powered up for the jump to hyperspace. Soon they would be gone, racing across the galaxy to fight. Another war against another predator species. Do you think they will succeed? Zaranel asked. Veltar thought about everything he had learned about humans, their violent history, their technological superiority, their absolute refusal to back down from a fight. He thought about Admiral Chen's quiet confidence and Commander Rodriguez's savage grin. The Krex Empire has no idea what they have gotten themselves into, he said finally. They think they are attacking weak prey. Instead, they have just given the Deathworlders another reason to go to war. Outside, the human fleet jumped to hyperspace in a brilliant flash of light. Within days, they would arrive at another star, system where innocent people were under attack. They would assess the situation, identify the aggressors, and do what humans did best. They would win. Veltar's communicator chimed with an incoming message. He read it quickly, then smiled. What is it? Zaranel asked. A message from the Molari Republic, he replied. They wanted to know if the Terran Federation had received their distress call. He composed a quick reply, thinking carefully about the words. This is Ambassador Veltar of the Kethlari Confederation. The Terran Federation has received your message. Admiral Chen sends her regards and asks that you prepare detailed tactical information about your enemies. Help is on the way. As he sent the message, Veltar allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Somewhere across the galaxy, another desperate species was about to learn what the Kethlari had learned. When you send an SOS to Deathworlders, they don't just answer the call. They bring everything they have, and they don't stop fighting until the job is done. The galaxy had new protectors, and evil would never succeed as long as humans were willing to stand up and fight.